Hello and welcome to The Top Story, the podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Qizhi. Coming up in this edition, leaders addressing the general debate of the UN General Assembly have called for the cessation of the violence that has ravaged the Middle East for months. Thousands of families have fled their homes amid Israel's bombardment of southern Lebanon. And floods have forced many students out of school in South Sudan's Unity State. We begin in North America. Leaders addressing the general debate of the UN General Assembly have called for the cessation of the violence that has ravaged the Middle East for months. The annual UN General Assembly opened on Tuesday in New York, with topics such as Ukraine and Sudan also taking center stage of the meetings. The United Nations Secretary-General and the UNGA President both delivered remarks at the gathering. Jody Jacobs says more from New York.
Conflict in the Middle East was front and center of every world leader's speech. The Secretary General, in delivering his 2024 report on the UN's work, said that world leaders were gathering in the shadow of raging conflicts in Gaza, Ukraine and Sudan. He has warned that geopolitical divisions are deepening and that the world is edging towards the unimaginable. Let's take a listen.
Gaza is a non-stop nightmare that threatens to take the entire region with it. Look no further than Lebanon. We should all be alarmed by the escalation. Lebanon is at the brink. The people of Lebanon, the people of Israel, and the people of the world cannot afford Lebanon to become another Gaza.
I take this opportunity to call for an immediate ceasefire for the Hamas-Israel war, the unconditional release of hostages, and for all parties to abide by international law, including international humanitarian law, and work towards a just and lasting solution grounded in the United Nations Charter, relevant resolutions, and international law ensuring dignity for both Palestinians and Israelis. Indeed, only a two-state solution can end the cycle of violence and instability, ensuring peace, security, and dignity for both Palestinians and Israelis.
Now, of course, these comments from both these high-ranking UN officials reflected the sentiments shared by many world leaders who took to that podium. Iran's president also demanding that the fighting stop, and he added that Israel was guilty of committing crimes against humanity. Now, South Africa's president saying that the torment of the people of Gaza continues unabated. Cyril Ramaphosa adding that South Africans know what apartheid looks like. They've lived through it, they've suffered, and they died under it. And he says that his country cannot remain silent and watch as apartheid is being perpetrated against others. And as heads of state and governments gather here, the calls for that de-escalation in that region rings very, very loud. This is expected to be a high-level meeting with foreign ministers and presidents expected to be present. There will once again, of course, be calls for peace and for de-escalation. But with the Security Council deadlocked on this particular issue, many believe that it might just be another meeting without any concrete action.
That was Jody Jacobs reporting on the general debate of the UN General Assembly. Moving on to the Middle East. Israel says it is carrying out extensive airstrikes in southern and eastern Lebanon. This follows Lebanese militant group Hezbollah's launch of a ballistic missile targeting the headquarters of Israel's Mossad spy agency near Tel Aviv. Sirens blared in the Israeli capital, but the country's military said its air defense systems intercepted a single surface-to-surface missile. The IDF says it was the first time a Hezbollah projectile had reached central Israel. Israeli forces also say they've identified and destroyed the launch site in southern Lebanon. While there are no immediate reports of damage or casualties in Tel Aviv, Israel's heaviest bombardment of Lebanon for years continues. Lebanese authorities say over 560 people have died in Israeli strikes on Lebanon since Monday morning. Hezbollah has also confirmed the death of a senior commander who Israel claimed to have killed with an airstrike in Beirut. Evangelos Sipsis has more from the Lebanese capital.
There has been an Israeli strike. According to the Israeli forces, it was a precision strike in the district of Dahi in the southern part of Beirut, the Lebanese capital. It targeted a Hezbollah commander. Now, the person who was targeted is Ibrahim Kouabisi, and he was reportedly to be a commander in the rocket division, which is responsible for the division that is firing rockets from southern Lebanon into northern Israel. Now, that's what the Israeli side have been saying, that they have targeted and they killed. The people that live in the area, they were concerned after the airstrike, and they were told by the Lebanese government to be able to go somewhere else. This attack, though, comes as more and more bombings have been taking place throughout South Lebanon on Monday, which has been described as the worst bombardment by Israel since the clashes erupted on October the 8th. Thousands and thousands of people had to flee their homes and find shelters in cities north than southern Lebanon, such as Saideh or even here in Beirut where we are.
That was Evangelos Sipsis on hostilities in Lebanon and Israel. In Africa, floods have forced many students out of school in South Sudan's unity state. Local authorities say most schools and health facilities have been submerged due to flooding. Patrick Elliott reports.
This is one of the few schools still operational in Rub Corner in South Sudan's unity state. Authorities here say learning cannot wait for the water to recede.
90% of our state is affected. 90%. Yes. Nobody. And most school, we have 115 schools submerged in this area. And the children become now IDPs under trees.
Aid agencies say 700,000 people have been displaced by floods this year. Many health facilities in Unity State at the border with Sudan are underwater. This facility, known as Abimnon Hospital, has survived the flooding because it is protected by dikes, and the number of patients in the facility has gone up. This is the only health facility for the population in this area, and medical personnel here say they lack basic equipment and basic medicine required for treatment. Stagnant flood water is leading to a rise in waterborne infections like cholera and vector-borne diseases like malaria.
We used to run shortage of the malaria drugs and especially drips. For us here, if we run shortage of drip and the community, they are not that able to all of them, they are not able to buy the drips for treatment of the patient. Most of the time we send people back to buy the drugs, and which is hard for them to do.
Many people fleeing violence from Sudan arrive here every day, exhausted, in need of medical services and schools for their children. But many of the facilities here are overrun by water.
That was Patrick Elliott reporting on floods in South Sudan. In Europe, heavy rainfall has swept across the UK, causing floods in southern and central parts of the country. Some areas received a month's worth of rainfall in 24 hours. Cleanup work is underway and flood warnings remain in place. Ray Addison went to one of the worst-hit areas.
Flooded roads and shuttered businesses. The shocking result of spells of torrential rain here in Bedfordshire. And although much of the water has now receded, flood warnings remain in place and the clean-up is far from over. At this major interchange, tanker crews pump water away whilst drivers face diversions north and south. National Highways confirming it has no timeline to reopen due to flood levels reaching up to 2.5 metres.
Every year we have a small storm and the road gets closed to a small amount of flooding, and 4 or 5 years later nothing gets changed, and the more rain, although they say it's a 2-month rainstorm in 2 days, we only get a small amount of rain and they get a flood. So it's just an accident waiting to happen, literally an accident waiting to happen.
In the nearby market town of Leighton Buzzard, several residential streets flooded, whilst vital community resources now face days of closure and costly repairs. Although emergency services and council teams are prioritising the most vulnerable, for some there's frustration that more wasn't done to prevent the flooding.
Well, it's the worst I've seen in my lifetime. There was 50 vulnerable people that we were told were helped, and 71 properties affected. I know of many people that do report that their drains are blocked. The complaints coming from those people that report these blocked drains are they're not listened to.
Although the worst appears to be over, community policing teams are urging people to avoid flooded and affected areas and not to attempt to drive, cycle or walk through floodwater because it can be deeper than it looks. Meanwhile, pressure will be on local councils and the Environment Agency to make sure that flooding like this doesn't happen again.
That was Ray Addison reporting on the floods hitting the UK. Finally, in Asia, participants at the China-ASEAN Expo in southern China have signed agreements on 109 projects, including international cooperation with ASEAN countries such as Vietnam and Malaysia. The trade event in Nanning brings together government officials and trade representatives. Gulf countries are featured for the first time this year in the regional capital of Guangxi. Yang Jinghao went to see what's on display.
Creating a diamond crown new future. This is the theme as well as the goal of this year's China-ASEAN Expo. The signature bilateral trade event between the two emerging economies kicked off in Nanning City on Tuesday. All ASEAN members are showcasing a diverse array of specialty products at the event. This year marks the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations between China and Malaysia, and it has been invited as the guest country of honor.
So these are the products that is solely produced from Malaysia. So we have a skincare range. All our products are organic and it's chlorine-free. I believe there are a lot of products from Malaysia that is bound to less known in China. We would like to create more connections with other distributors in China and hope to bring in more Malaysian products as well.
For the first time, Gulf countries have been invited to participate, with the UAE acting as the guest partner.
China is on top of trading partner for UAE also for the last almost 20 years. What we see there is potential for upgrading the level of cooperation between China and UAE in the future, but additional to that, we have very strong partnership and strategic relations with ASEAN.
In addition to highlights from ASEAN countries, the event also features the latest advancements in emerging fields, such as digital technology, green low-carbon solutions, new energy, and smart connected vehicles. And Chinese enterprises are determined to unlock cooperative potential with ASEAN countries in these areas.
We have extensive cooperation potential with ASEAN countries in new energy, particularly in green electricity, green hydrogen, green ammonia, and green methanol. As there is significant demand in these areas, moving forward, we will focus on high quality and high efficiency collaboration. The ASEAN Expo serves as an international platform for cooperation, not just between China and ASEAN, but as a global collaboration platform encompassing a green transition, digitalization, and integration.
Since 2009, China has been ASEAN's biggest trading partner. Official figures indicate that in the first 7 months of this year, two-way trade reached $552 billion, an increase of 7.7% year-on-year. Participants believe that the expo will play a more active role in generating more business opportunities for both sides and beyond.
That was Yang Jinghao in Nanning. Recapping the headlines, leaders addressing the General Debate of the UN General Assembly have called for the cessation of the violence that has ravaged the Middle East for months. Thousands of families in Lebanon have fled their homes amid Israel's continued bombardments of the southern part of the country. And floods have forced many students out of school in South Sudan's unity state. That's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a 1-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thanks for listening.